You are now unmuted. You are now muted. You are now unmuted. You are now muted. You are now unmuted. You are now muted. You are now unmuted. You are now muted.
الله بالخير.
هيثم معود عماي.
شنو هاي صدر عمك صدر؟
هي صدى عندك انت يا سيد الماي مو بالنرجيله.
شنو الصدى عندي؟ شلون عندي؟ هسه اكو صدى عندي. هسه تسديته. تسمع صدى مني؟
والله عم صوتك يعني مزربل.
شلون فضحتنا عالم. انت على الهواء مباشرة، شلون تسولف؟
ما سامع هذا المصطلح روح ترجمه وصوتك يقطع. شوف نت غير هذا.
يعني الصوت بالنت. هسه صوته يعني كلش متقطع.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
خيره.
You are now unmuted.
محمد
زين.
السلام عليكم.
You are now muted.
سيف. هل تسمعني؟ أجب. شلونك؟
بعد قلبك بخير. انت شلونك؟
شلون صوتي مضبوط؟
اي واضح يمي. ولو انا بشغل صوت
بس في
سيارات.
رامي يقول لي صوتك شو ما اسمع سيارات يمك، ما اسمع سيارات.
بس انا جاي اسمع. محمد بس قد ما قد عدى انت.
شلون؟ هذا رامي ما يقدر هذا.
وين عمار الجو هنا؟ عمار طاب؟ هذا موجود عمار.
محمد عبد الجليل يا ابن القصي شلونك؟
لا بعد قصتي رامي العزيز شلونك يا بعد روحي؟
شلونك؟
عقلك معود وين بالحروب بالسماتة.
حياك هاي ايش اسوي محمد يا معود؟
مو انا الصوت مو شيء.
ابو ياسر. استاذ عمار.
Now
بعد
unmuted.
قلبي خالي انا عبالي الدكتور موجود. شلونك؟
شلونك؟
شلون امورك؟
والله
شلونك
بخير.
استاذ عمار؟
الله يسلمك استاذ رعد.
هاي اكو وش نشب.
خالي شلونك؟
شو هاي ما اعرف شنو السالفه. حتى يمكن اكو هيجي تقطيع.
اي انا هم يمي.
شاي ليش هاي؟ شنو هاي؟
هذا عبد الحكيم كلم شو ما جاي يطلع.
ما عرفت ان السبب هاي ليش هاي
بسبب العيد مال نيروز مش اسمه هذي هو.
مين لابس منو؟
لا صدق يا لابس هيدفون.
هذا عمار رجع الازعاج وياه.
لا تحكي على خالك، ترى خالك، ترى خالك. Respect your uncle please. Respect your uncle.
حيدر عبد حيدر جاي يقول لكم مشكلة.
سيف روح قل له وجوده عدم وجوده لا يعني شيء.
Hello everyone, I hope that you are all right. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, please write number 1 in the dialog box, please.
Good afternoon دكتور.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. I hope all is fine with you. We have got almost all the students in class. I've just wrapped up my previous class and I'm starting this one. Because some of the students are still not present in the class, I'm going to take the attendance at the end of the class. Remember, at the end of the class, not right now, because everyone will have the opportunity to do their best to join us. Is it okay with you?
Yes, Doctor, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Okay, I hope that you have studied this chapter conscientiously. It's a very interesting, insightful chapter. It gives a good history of the teaching of listening skill, and at the same time, it talks about the various processes involved in listening. Okay. I think that we have got a presentation right now. Am I right? We've got a presentation.
Yes, Doctor.
Who is this? Who is going to present?
You?
Yusuf
Yes,
Oje?
yes,
Is it you?
yes,
Okay. Very
yes,
good. Very good. I think that you have prepared yourself for this presentation fully. And you are ready
absolutely.
to give, yes, I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to wrap up your presentation. And right after the presentation, students will have the opportunities to ask you a question, and I hope that you take all the questions. They can ask the questions if they can ask me the question if they want to. So Yusuf Ode, the floor is yours. You've got 10 minutes to finish it up. Okay, you can start right
Yes,
now.
yeah, Doctor. Thank you. First of all, I will explain five chapter with listening. Listening is the first of the four skills that we engage in and also plays a central role in second language acquisition. In this chapter, I will explain what is listening comprehension, types of listening, and some of processes. Listening comprehension is a receptive skill. It is an interactive process in which listeners interact with the text, the task, and the context. Due to the importance of listening comprehension in language acquisition, it is vital for second or foreign language teaching curriculum or program to have in its core listening activities. Listening is cognitive activity in which listeners, based on their background knowledge, schemata, which theory, which is one of the important theories of learning that affects learners' memory. There are two major categories of schemata, those related to content and those related to form. Our content schemata are the knowledge structures in our minds, and formal schemata are those knowledge structures that enable us to recognize the genre of what we are hearing or reading. Listening is an active process for construction, meaning in which two kinds of processes are involved at the same time: bottom up or decoding and top down processing, which are both necessary in listening comprehension. Top down processing is defined as the higher level process driven by listeners' expectations and understandings of the context, the topic, and the nature of the world, while bottom up or decoding processing is at the lower level a process triggered by the sounds, words, and phrases which listener has he or she attempted to decode speech and assign meaning. But the same words, phrases, and sentences here can have different meaning depending on suprasegmental features of speech. So both contextual factors and linguistic factors contribute to meaning building. Now, I will briefly explain types of listening. Field notes that listening lessons often consist of two phases. He called extensive listening as we want to get the gist of the spoken message. Extensive listening helps students to improve their skills and pronunciation. It takes place outside the classroom and can use different materials for extensive listening. Second phase, which Field calls intensive listening. The students listen for details and answer a specific question. Intensive listening involves listening closely to hear specific linguistics elements such as words, phonemes, and so on. Selective listening involves listening with a specific focus. For instance, learners may concentrate on numbers, dates, times, places, directions, and so on. It's important here in selective listening to determine what sorts of listening our learners must do. Autonomous listening involves self-directed listening activities. The learners choose what to listen to and decide how they will respond, and then seek feedback on their comprehension and monitor on progress. Now I will explain some listening strategies. There are several elaboration strategies language learners can use to promote the autonomous listening. These include elaborating using prior knowledge from outside the input and relating it to content in the input. Personal elaboration, which involves connecting the listening material to our own prior experience. Another such strategies are creative elaboration, visual elaboration, and also there are some some subtypes of the broad strategies of evaluating, which Rost defined as checking the outcome of one's listening process against standard of accuracy, such as performance evaluation, problem evaluation, and vision evaluation. Phases of the lessons to help students learn new information, teachers should know what background knowledge their learners have. This demands specific and careful preparation on the behalf of English as a foreign language teachers for listening lessons. Here are some procedures and activities that help teachers in preparing for the three phases of listening. The first one is pre-listening activities. In this stage, teachers would pre-teach the vocabulary and the structure in the listening passage. These activities usually aim at preparing learners for the listening task by helping them identify the purpose of listening beforehand, bold and activate whatever background knowledge learners might need to engage in the listening task and successfully make meaning of the spoken text. While listening, this state is well-designed activities can help students to understand the listening passage, listening for the gist, for detail, making deduction, active participation, dictation, and so on. Post listening, in this stage, teachers would ask comprehension questions about the text. These activities usually aim at making that learners have fully comprehended the spoken text. In recent years, the teaching of listening has been about the use of authentic materials such as songs, movies, internet, the news, in which all these resources go to the development of listening among the learners. Finally, I will mention to challenge faced learners. One of the most challenging listening process faced by second language speakers is inference from spoken text. Inference is defined as filling in missing parts of a text or adding reasoning processes to make sense of a text. Besides its importance, listening comprehension is challenging both teachers and learners. Most learners face troubles in listening to a foreign language and often complain to their teachers that they could not understand and please them to speak in their native language. That's it, Doctor. I finished.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, thank you, thank you too, Doctor. Thank
It
you
was
for all.
it was a wonderful, fluent, insightful presentation. I think that you have covered everything in the chapter, and what you presented was entirely comprehensible. I appreciate your presentation. I think that it was one of the best presentation that I heard. Really, it was very interesting, very systematic, and you have wrapped it up within the time limit you were given. Thank you.
Thank
So,
you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
okay, so if
Okay,
you've got, yes, if you have
if
got
anyone
any,
has a question,
Mhm.
but before this, I will ask my colleagues question.
Mhm.
When I studied this chapter hard, uh, as you know, the hearing is automatic process and listening is conscious process. So, is hearing the same as listening? This is my question actually.
Mhm.
You are now unmuted.
Yes, it is your
Go ahead.
class. You don't need my permission. Your class.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Okay, go ahead. And what? Excuse me, repeat it. Intensive, yeah, in both actually, the
You are
teacher
now
role
muted.
is to be organizer, give clear instruction to his or to their students, to build our their students' confidence, and also give them feedback organizer, and he is also feedback organizer to be supportive when organizing feedback after the listening. And he will and think about their answers, they are correct or incorrect. As Mr. Yaqoubi mentioned in his previous lecture, the teacher may do comprehension checks, confirmation checks, and clarification requests if needed.
You are
Okay,
now
that's it.
unmuted.
Yes,
And selective, excuse me,
yes, doctor.
in selective listening, as I mentioned, as I mentioned in my presentation, it's important in selective listening to know the sort of listening our students must do. For example, how teacher give them games, uh, tape player, disc player, and so on. Thank you.
Yes, yes, doctor.
You are
Can I?
now muted.
Yes, it is your class. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Yusuf. Can I ask you some question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. What is the
Go ahead.
difference between bottom-up process and top-down process? How can we differentiate between them?
Actually, I mentioned in my page, and if we want to make a contribution or listening activity, we must begin with top-down process, because here listeners use their background knowledge and expectations that help their listeners to interpret what is heard, what will come next. Because in top-down approach, it is important for students to focus on and listening for the main idea, predicting, drawing inference, summarizing, and then they and here on top down process as an English teacher, ask three listening questions. How the students contribute to create meaning. In bottom up, listeners actually relies on the language in the message and how they use their knowledge to combine grammar, sounds, words to create meaning as well. They are listening for specific details. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Okay. Can I answer your question about the differentiation between listening and hearing? Yes.
Listening and what?
Yes, listening and hearing. One's ability to comprehend spoken language at discourse level, including conversation, stories, and informational oral text. That involves the process of extracting and constructing meaning. And the listening is, as my colleague Haidar said, is consciousness process, while hearing is unconsciousness process.
Yes, excellent. We can also say listening is active process and hearing is passive process. In listening we can create meaning, but in hearing we may or may not create meaning. Thank you, Kisan. Thank you.
Yes.
Can I ask you? Yes. Can I
Okay.
ask you, Yusuf?
Okay, go ahead.
How can teacher help their students extract meaning from listening text?
Please repeat it if you can. If you don't mind, repeat
How
your
can-
question, please.
How can teachers help their students extract meaning from a listening text?
How teachers develop their learners how
Help.
to extract meaning from listening.
Yeah, from listening text.
Okay. As I mentioned in my presentation, the most significant processes or approach, they are top down and bottom up. The students must acquainted and must be familiar with the purpose of listening to activate background knowledge of the topic. And also they as English teacher can give their students and select top-down and bottom-up strategies at the same time to construct meaning, and also make the three strategies we have taken in the previous lecture check comprehension while listening. Thank you.
Yes, can I ask?
Okay, go ahead.
Yusuf, as you are a teacher, does you use a top-down or bottom-up process when you want to teach your students?
Actually, I don't hear your question.
As you are a teacher, when you to teach your student, you choose top-down or bottom-up process?
Actually, both of them. But actually, we can start with top-down approach.
Okay. Thank you.
From the high level to the low level. Okay, that's it. Thank you all.
Can I ask you some question?
Rami, go ahead.
Yes,
Rami,
my
go
question.
ahead.
What do you think, Mr. Do you think in which kind of listening is important? We get a more benefit.
I don't understand your question actually. In which process you mean? In which process? In which approach?
No. My question about type of listening. In which type, in which kind, we get more benefit. It is important.
Actually, as I mentioned, in extensive listening and intensive listening, they are so significant, both of them, because here the teacher plays a big role to develop his students' background knowledge, how he gave them types of games, types of tests, as disc players, as CD players, and so on. I mentioned that, Rami.
Okay, thank you very much for your very controversial questions, and I think that the presenter dealt with many of the questions adequately, very insightful answers. I'm very thankful of your good questions. One important question that one of the students asked was about the types of listening. Which type is more beneficial to a student? When you look at the question from various angles, you can't give a definite answer to this question. Which type is more beneficial? From which type do we derive more benefit? You have to be very mindful of this question. I think that, all of them are equally effective. We have at least four different types of listening: intensive listening, selective listening, extensive
Autonomous
listening,
listening, yes,
and autonomous listening.
That's
Which one is better? Okay, all of them are good. all of them are equally good. It depends on the purpose that the teacher follows. So I think that it is your responsibility as a teacher to identify your pedagogical purpose at first, and then you have to opt for the type of listening. So if you want to promote students' linguistic knowledge, I think that you are going to single out intensive listening because it is focused. But if you want to develop students' autonomy, you want students to choose their own materials, whether authentic or inauthentic, I think that you are going to choose autonomous listening. If you want to promote students' listening, if you want to develop their critical thinking, comprehension, well, possibly you are going to opt for extensive listening. So it is not entirely, correct to say which one is more effective because all of them can be effective. It all depends on the purpose that you pursue, you, the teacher. You know your students, you know their shortcomings, you know their needs. So, on the basis of your own judgment, you use, for example, one type of listening for one session, another type for another session. Uh, so, it all comes down to the pedagogical decision that you make. Am I clear? Am I clear?
Yes, Doctor. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Because it was a question that one of the students asked, and I think that that question was important. So, which one is better? Focus. Which one is better? Form and accuracy context, meaning and fluency context, task-based context, or procedural context. You remember them from the previous session. The answer is all of them are good. All of them are equally good. All of them are needed by the students. So it depends on the context you are in. It depends on the pedagogical purpose that you are following. Okay? Any other questions? Do you have any questions, students in the class? Yes, Haydar Abdul Hamza, yes. One completes others. They are, in a sense, mutually enabling. Okay. One type of a listening task serves one purpose, another serves another purpose, and when they all come together, they will promote the listening ability. Yes, Hassan Mahmoud Abid, do you have a question? Other students? I have come to realize that, you've got no questions about these issues that have been talked about. So if you have got any problems with the content of this chapter, please raise your questions because while I'm talking, I may be able to address specifically to your questions. Any questions about the content? Can you hear me? It's so quiet here.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I have a comment, please, if you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead. Your comment. Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
You got disconnected. I can't hear you. Yes, go
Yes,
ahead.
draw a very important point. That's teaching listening in second or foreign language classroom. Sometimes it is not easily because listening comprehension is very sometimes difficult to build meaning of what the speaker has said and what is he meant by his speech. So the teacher has very important role to facilitate his or to develop his learners' abilities to comprehend or to decode, first decoding speech and then building up meaning through two different processes. First, by building his linguistic knowledge, then says that it is not enough if the listener who has just linguistic knowledge, it is not enough to grasp meaning or to negotiate meaning. He must also develop his top down knowledge to develop his background knowledge in order to be able to understand the text or to understand the speaker. This is very important. Bailey in this chapter emphasis on listening comprehension in non-interactive listening. Why? Because it is very important. Sometimes through the interactive listening, you may have the chance to ask the speaker to reformulate his speech. Sometimes if you don't understand, you can ask easily, would you say it again, please? Can you reformulate your speech? But here in non-interactive listening, it is very important to develop the learner ability to grasp meaning through strategies and through some classroom activities like watching films, listening to songs. So it is very important to develop listening or to comprehend speech. Thank you very much.
Yes, very good points. Very good points, Qasim Jalil. Thank you. Thank you very much. More comments? More comments?
Doctor?
Yes, doctor.
Reform Modik Abd, yes.
About top down and down. I think we use the top-down process for watching movies and hearing the news and things that we need to build a general idea about. While we use a bottom-up process in teaching a lot because it focuses on the subtle detail, also on the form and on the structure.
Absolutely, yes. Good point. Very good point, yes.
Yes, doctor, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Sumaya, yes.
Yes, doctor, can we consider decoding one of the challenges we face in non-interactive listening?
Yes, it's, sometimes, when you can, sometimes when you can decode what you can hear, well, it can constitute a problem for the listener. If you can decode what you are hearing, what you are listening, well, it can be a problem. Yes, yes, why not? So part and part.
Thank you, doctor.
Yes, yes, okay. Now, okay, so if you have no other comments on the content, okay, I'd like to add a few points. Qasim Jalil, do you want to say anything?
If you don't mind, Doctor, this is the last comment I want to share with you.
Okay, go
Yes.
ahead. Go ahead. Not at all.
Yes, thank you very much. In the 1980s, there was a shift from considering listening as being linguistic to schema-based view.
Yes.
This is a very important point. As we studied in some approaches or methods of teaching language, like grammar, translation, or audiolingualism, that say the good listener who has a good who has the ability to master the linguistic component, and then realize that even though that the listener may be able to decode or understand words, phonemes, syllables, have large linguistic knowledge, but maybe he can't speak appropriately. This is the reason why there is a shift from consider listening as being a linguistics to schema. So in the 19s, there a new theory which is called the schema, that is based on the background knowledge, the image in your memory, on how to develop this image in order to speak appropriately, to understand appropriately. For example, when I have read a sentence in a song in this book, for example, her waistline is expanding through. If you want to understand what the speaker meant by this, it is not easy. You can't understand the meaning. Also, I have heard from some conversation or in films, for example, a sentence, she has a bun in the oven. I thought it is about cake. He is talking about cake. But then I realized that you have to develop your background. You have to infer the meaning and to depend on yourself to grasp meaning. I realized that he is talking, she has a bun in the oven, mean she is pregnant. And so when I read this sentence, her waistline is expanding, he mean that she is pregnant. So grasping meaning or negotiating meaning sometimes is not easily. So how to develop the learner abilities to grasp or to comprehend what speech he is listening to? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Very insightful, Wasim Jalil. You know, you use your personal experience to talk about listening. I liked it very much. I think that, well, there was a lot to be learned from his comments. Very good, very good. I liked it, really. Thank you, Wasim Jalil. Any more points? Anything? So if you want to ask me questions, okay, please let me know.
You are now unmuted.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, go ahead.
Is there any similarity or difference between top down and bottom up and the two major categories, content schemata and formal schemata?
Very good.
Schema
Very good.
or schema.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Well, when you study the chapter, you come to realize that historically, listening has been categorized into two parts. Of course, in the 1970s, bottom of approach was in its heydays, but in 1980s, we had a revolutionary shift from bottom-up approach to top-down approach. Well, as you said, and you have elaborated on this topic quite in depth, they are very much different, very, very much different. In the 1970s, it was commonly acknowledged that if a student has basic knowledge over forms, if a student can identify words, sentence boundary, contraction, individual sounds, and so on and so forth, if the student has a thoroughgoing knowledge of forms, he will be a successful listener. So, what guarantees successful listening was believed to be a thoroughgoing knowledge of language forms. So, in the 1970s, a lot of books were published focusing on promoting students' knowledge of forms. But in the 1980s, we had another massive revolution in listening. It said that, well, a prerequisite for listening is mastery over the basic structures of language, a mastery over the basic elements of language, but that is not enough. That is not enough at all. In a sense that if you have good knowledge of these basic structures, basic forms, it doesn't guarantee that you'll become a successful listener. You can comprehend whatever you are listening to. In the 1980s, many researchers and theoreticians came to realize that there is another dimension to listen in, and that dimension is background knowledge. In a sense, they were focusing on schema, the structure of knowledge that you have accumulated in your mind, that you have got in your memory, you have accumulated over the years. In a sense, if you have prior knowledge over what you are going to listen, if you have good background knowledge, knowledge structure in your long-term memory, you are going to deal with the listening task that you are dealing with more adequately. So you can see that there are two dimensions to listening. One is important, but it is not more important than the other. Both are important and both are mutually enabling. So, in a sense, the book says that if you want to be a successful listener, you should have good knowledge of basic grammar, and at the same time, you have to be in position of good background knowledge because they are going to help each other. Sometimes, possibly you have encountered this situation yourself, or you have noticed students who does not possess good grammar knowledge, but because he has very good background knowledge, he listens to something and he understands it very well. So, they have to be together. The students have to be taught in the basic grammar, and the students have to be prepared for what they are going to listen. Now, how can we prepare students to be successful in listening? Okay, one way is to ask pre-listening questions. Why? By asking pre-listening questions, you can sort of activate their background knowledge, and if their background knowledge is activated, they expect what they are going to listen, and they can relate what they hear to what they know. So the cognitive pressure on them will be significantly reduced. when we are talking about schema and about the different types of schema, we are actually talking about the top-down process, not about the bottom-up process. Because schema is talking about background knowledge, structure of knowledge, as you said, the images that you have got in your memory. And it's going to help you a lot with your listening. So when we are teaching listening, we have to, you remember from the previous semester when we were talking about various contexts, form and accuracy context, meaning and fluency context, task-based context, procedural context. You remember we said that in class we have to have all the context. You cannot say that in my class I'm going to focus on meaning and fluency context, because if you focus just on fluency, well, student will become very fluent, but their accuracy will suffer. So you have to have form and form and accuracy context. You should have meaning and fluency context, and you have other contexts in your class so that your students develop their language. It is exactly the same thing for teaching listening. You can't say that, well, in my classes, I'm going to have only a bottom-up processes, because if you have that to the exclusion of the other one, students listening will suffer. If you are going to focus only on top-down approach, again, the same thing happens. So they have to be together. They have to be together from the very beginning to the very end. By top-down approach, you are going to develop students' general comprehension ability. You are going to promote their critical ability. You are going to motivate your students. Students will feel a sense of self-efficacy, if you will. And by bottom-up approach, you will develop their forms of knowledge. And the more knowledge they have about forms, okay, possibly it's going to help them with their listening. So they have to be together. Which one is better? Okay, both are important. This one is not preferable to the other. That one is not preferable to the other. They are both good. They have to be together. They have to help each other. We have to use both of them in class. Okay? And it is exactly like these types of listening. Which type of listening is better? Okay, you can say that, for example, extensive, autonomous, intensive, or selective. They are all important. They have to be used in class and outside the classroom. So you see what is very important, as we look back, we see that we have progressed a lot. Originally, this listening skill was called a Cinderella skill because it was not paid any attention to. Later on, we saw that we had bottom-up approach in which a lot of attention was paid to the knowledge of grammar, and later we have another stage, which is the top-down process, which shows us we have to look at other dimensions of listening as well. But traditionally, if you look at your classes, I'm asking you, if you look at your own classes, if you look at many of the books available in the market, which process is usually focused on? Can you tell me? Rami, can you hear me? Rami, can you hear me? Reza, Savad, Rami. Rami, can you see? Yes? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, of course, Doctor.
Okay. Are you a language teacher yourself?
No, no.
Oh, you're not. Who is a language teacher? Can somebody tell me if he is a language teacher?
Yes, Doctor. Can you repeat, Doctor? Can you repeat your question?
Okay. Muhammad Ria.
Yes.
Okay. Can you turn your microphone off? Listen to me. Okay. Well, Muhammad, when you are in class, when you are teaching, for example, an English class, you possibly teach students in their listening ability. You want to promote their listening skill. Which type of listening, which approach do you use in your class mostly?
Yes, yes, Doctor. I choose selective.
Okay, what do you mean by
listening.
selective?
Yes. You asked me about which type I choose when I am teaching in the class.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So I chose the type of listening, selective listening. So I focus some words and some phrases or phonemes which listen I am teaching it and to perform the goal in the class.
You mean that you pay more attention to forms than to meaning?
What?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, go
Can
ahead.
I answer?
Yes.
Yes, actually, as a teacher, we need to use most of the most types of listening according to the pedagogical focus. Sometimes we need to intensive listening, sometimes selective. It is according to the pedagogical focus.
Very good, very good. But listen to me. Can anybody give me an example of top-down approach?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, can you give me an example of a top-down approach in your class?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes.
Yes, Doctor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I do. Yusuf, go ahead.
Okay, Doctor. Thank you. Actually, in your first question about what type of listening I will choose as English English teacher, actually, may I choose extensive listening, because in extensive listening, I can help students to improve their skills and their pronunciation, and also use top-down approach. Because in top-down approach, for example, I give them games, and I can give them a lot of pictures, kinds of songs, and I will ask my students question about pre-listening questions. What do you understand from these pictures? What do you understand from these songs? What do you elicit? What do you inference in top-down approach? And then they can focus on the main idea of and the purpose of listening and top-down on top-down approach, and then transfer to the bottom-up approach to both tasks, and then they realize what they are identify, how I create meaning from the top-down approach.
Very good, very good. It is generally acknowledged that if you want to start a listening course or a listening lesson, you'd better start with a top down approach. Now, let me give you an example of a top down approach because it is very important to have a clear idea of what it is like. If you see a concrete example, possibly we appreciate it better. Okay, for example, in my own class, I remember, years ago, I was actually conducting a listening class, and I was thinking a lot how to deal with the various aspects of listening. And at last, I decided to start each lesson with a top-down approach. In a top-down approach, students are much oriented to meaning. This is very, very important. The students are not focused to the basic grammar of language, not concentrating on grammatical points or forms or anything. Because if you draw their attention to grammar and forms too much, language learning will be very demotivating, if not frustrating. Okay, the example was like this. I gave my students, for example, a number of pictures. The pictures were very, very similar. They were not very, very different. For example, I gave them 5 pictures, and they had to listen to something that I had already provided. They listened to the audio, and they had to identify on the basis of what they listened, the picture that the audio talked about. So, for example, you were my student. I give you 5 pictures, 10 pictures, and the pictures were very similar, and you had to listen to a piece of listening task. You had to listen very, very carefully, and you didn't have to pay close attention to every word. You had to understand, the gist of the meaning. And on the basis of that, you had to identify the picture. Sometimes, students couldn't do it when they listened it first. And they usually asked me to replay the tape, and I replayed it. And sometimes they asked me even to replay again because they were so much concentrating on the content being communicated by the task that they didn't, pay attention to this minute grammatical point. So this is a good example of a what? Bottom-up approach or top-down approach? Tell me. Is this a good is it a good example? Is it a good example of top-down approach or bottom-up approach?
I think it is a top-down approach.
Okay, why, Rami, is it a top-down approach?
Because all students speak about what he listen, not the background knowledge.
Yes, Doctor. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yes, Doctor. Because in top-down approach, students be more interesting motivation in contrast to bottom-up. Okay, bottom-up maybe they be dismotivation.
Yes, but you have to remember that my students were meaning oriented in this task. Do you understand? They were meaning
Yes,
oriented.
I
They
got
were
that.
not accuracy oriented. You know, I didn't want to draw their attention to forms. I wanted them to listen to the tape, identify the picture, and enjoy it. This is an example of a top-down approach. So I started my class with a top-down approach. I wanted my student to listen to authentic language, enjoy it, and try to figure out what the teller said to them. It was a non-interactive listening task. You know, when they did it, they usually ask, I want everyone to listen to me very carefully because there are small points that you have to listen. You have to understand. Okay, you know, I played it once, I played it twice, I played it 3 times, and when they did the task successfully, they usually asked me about specific sentences in the listening activity that they didn't understand. And I played those sentences to them so that they could understand them, and sometimes I helped them with their problem. For example, sometimes, you know, they couldn't understand the sentence because there was assimilation in it, because they didn't understand the sentence boundary, because they didn't understand contraction. You know, in the second part of the class, after they had done the first one, you know, I took what approach? Can you tell me what approach did I take?
Yes, bottom up, doctor. Bottom
Very
up
good.
approach.
Yes, very good. Bottom up. Because I was,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, because they ask about the form, not the meaning.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they were very motivated because they needed the form. Listen to this again. Listen to this again. It's a very important point. Students need to feel that they need to understand something. You know, when they asked me to replay the sentence again, that sentence was important to them. And when they realized that they didn't understand contraction, contraction became important to them. So they paid attention to it and they gradually could internalize it. So, you know, so what happens in my class? I started with a top-down approach, meaning oriented. They did some task, and after that, I advanced to accuracy oriented listening. You know, I didn't say that. Did you understand that sentence? Did you understand this sentence? No, I didn't ask that. I said, do you have any questions about the passage? Were there any places in the passage that you didn't understand? And they usually bombarded me with a lot of questions. Why? Because they needed it. So, what is the cause of learning? Can you tell me? What is the cause of learning here? Anybody? You are not listening, are you?
You are now unmuted.
Can you hear?
You are now muted.
Can you hear me?
You are now unmuted. You are now
Doctor,
muted.
can you repeat the question?
Okay, you know, I have been talking for half an hour, and do I have to repeat myself for half an hour again? Sajjad, can you hear me? You say that there is no sound, really? If you can hear
Yes,
me.
yes, doctor.
You can hear me. Okay, now I said that, in the second stage, a student asked me questions about forms. Why did they ask me about the forms? Can you tell me?
You are now unmuted.
Why did the students ask me about the forms? Haydar, can you answer me? No, Haydar. They didn't want to understand because they did the task. They understood it.
Because they think that form is important.
Yes, Zainab. Very good answer. Because the students felt that they needed the form. And if you feel the need, do you learn it or not? Sure you do. So you see what happens in the class? You start from the top-down approach and gradually you move to the bottom of approach. And your bottom of approach is sort of managed by your students. You answer your students' question because they feel that they need it. This is the way that we teach listening usually. This is the way that we go about teaching listening. So you start from top-down approach, you give them some meaning-oriented activities, they do the activities, they enjoy the activities, they are fun activities. Having done the activities, the students have some questions with the listening activities, and you address those questions. But if you reverse the order, if you start with a bottom of approach, focusing the students on the form that they don't feel the need for, and then you gradually move on to top-down approach, what happens? Can you tell me? Oh, this is...
Yes, Doctor. Yes.
Yes, Ghassan. What happens?
Yes, I want to comment. I think it is very important to lower the affective filter, as Karshan said in his theory. You have to start with the top down approach in order to promote students for learning. If you do the verse, the students may be get anxious and they maybe feel bored and disappointed from what you are saying, and maybe don't interest in your way of learning.
Yes.
Am I right or not?
Yes, absolutely. They surely become demotivated because they have to learn something for which there is no need. But, traditionally, if you look at many classrooms, okay, look at your classroom. You are adults now. Do you remember your own English classrooms? Okay, Okay, Qasim Jalil, how did your teacher teach listening to you? Did he start with top-down approach or bottom-up approach?
Yes, I think they always start with the bottom-up approach. So we were always hate English, hate the way. So when we graduate, we can't speak, we can't understand English. But now the new ways, I think it is very important to confirm that you must use top down approach. It is very important.
Yes.
But I think I have an idea. I have an opinion. I think sometimes this is just for children.
You are now muted.
Maybe for adults, I recognize that when you start with the bottom up approach, it's maybe it is not a problem. I think adults may be different from children, But
No,
if
no,
you
no,
do
no,
this
no,
with
no,
children,
no, Qasim Jalil, this is not the case. This is not the case. Okay, you know, a lot of research
yes,
has been done and have shown that, you know, adults have to start with top-down approach and gradually move toward bottom of approach. Remember that adults
You are
do
now
not
muted.
learn. Who learns? Tell me. Adults do not learn. Who learns?
yes,
Who learns? You know,
children, yes.
no, 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 no. Adults do, no, no, no. Adults do not learn. Their brains learn. Do you understand what I'm saying? It is their brains that learn. You know, adults may say that, well, it is okay if you start with bottom of approach, but if you do that, they may like it, but their brains don't learn it. So you have to be very, very mindful of this issue. Okay, somebody may like something, but if you provide it for him, for example, let me give you a simple example. For example, suppose that I'm ill. Okay, I have a sore throat. And the doctor says that you shouldn't have ice cream. And I tell my mother that I like ice cream. Mother, buy me ice cream because I like it and it is not bad for my throat. Am I right or not?
You are now unmuted.
Am I right or not?
Absolutely not right.
Yes, you are not right. So if adults say that, well, we can start with the bottom of approach,
muted.
well, they may like it, but is it good for them? This is a very important issue. This is a very important issue because adults do not know, your students who are adults do not know how they learn. You, the teacher, know how they learn. So you have to work based on what research and theory says. Am I clear?
Yes, doctor, clear. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Very, very important. Very, very important. Okay. For example, you may have some students, you have a private language students, and some students say to you that, okay, can you teach us grammar? Okay. But they don't understand that teaching them grammar is not good for them because they don't learn it. You know, they have to be involved in meaningful activities, meaning oriented activities like bottom up approach. I'm sorry, top down approach, because it is meaning oriented. But if you want to focus only on bottom up approach, well, because they are not involved in the task, because, you know, their brains don't feel the need for the grammar, well, they don't learn. After a few weeks in your language institute, for example, they feel that they haven't learned anything. So we have to remember that. We have to remember that for students to become motivated, to continue with their studies, they have to be involved in meaning-oriented activities. And after meaningful activities, they can slowly progress toward form-focused activities. You shouldn't reverse the order.
Please, doctor, do you mean that we should always start with top down rather than bottom up in all stage?
You know
Or
what? Hind, you have to remember that it is very difficult for me to say always. You know why? Because I am not the teacher in your class. But in most cases, you have to start with a top-down approach. In most cases.
yes, 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 I understand. Yes.
You are
Yes.
now unmuted.
Yes, good. Uh-huh. Ah. Oh, you do? Really? This is not a good example of top-down approach. Not a good example. Listening comprehension. Okay. Yes, yes, I do understand what you are saying. So you have listening comprehension in your classroom. Okay, very good, very good. And in your final and midterm exam. Yes.
You are now
Sorry, Doctor.
Yes.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Yes. Can you consider this type of listening because the students, the learners, don't interested in it is obligatory lessons.
Ibtisam, you were breaking up. I couldn't figure out what you said. Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, as my colleague Haidar said, in Iraq, the lesson comprehension is obligatory lesson. Yes, and the student should listen at this short passage, and they must answer the question in order to get marks. So they aren't interested in its lesson itself.
Yes, I do understand.
Yes. Can we consider it button up?
It is, well, as you explained it, because I haven't seen it, I haven't been, at the exam sessions, I can definitely say that it is bottom up or top down, but I feel that it is more bottom up than top down. But remember that, what we are talking here is not for exams. We are talking about what teachers do in class. This is very important. What we do in class. In class, we have to do something to motivate the students. We have to divert their attention from grammar, and they have to pay attention to grammar when they feel the need for. We have to bring fun activities. They have to listen, they have to identify a picture, they have to listen something in order to find a point on a map. Okay, they have to listen to something in order to build, for example, a house. Do you understand what I'm saying? It means that they are actively listening to what they hear in order to do something. Not to answer something, to do something.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes. And it is called authentic listening. If it is done like that, it is called authentic listening. Yeah, Rami, yes.
Yes, my question, in which approach, top down or bottom up, is gave to the students brainstorming?
I don't understand.
In which approach, for example, I am a teacher, a student, for students. In which approach to the students brainstorming?
You can give brainstorming for either one. You can give brainstorming for top-down approach or bottom-up approach. So it has nothing to do with approaches. But most often we give brainstorming to top-down approach because it is more meaningful.
I think you say in bottom up down, students don't need to learn.
In what?
Don't need to learn. How I can do that?
Could you elaborate on that? I can't figure it out. I didn't understand.
I will try that, sorry.
Okay. So it's a very important thing. Well, do you have any questions about the rest of the chapter? I think that I have talked about most of them, you can of course understand the practical activities using songs, okay, dictations, announcements, and things like that.
Yes, doctor.
Mm.
Doctor,
Yes,
if,
I'm listening.
if the learning if the learning English language focus on meaning and fluency
Mm.
more than form and accuracy. So why the greater degree uh, for form and accuracy in written exams?
I think that, well, those who do it, they are not very wise.
Mm.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes,
Yes.
yes, if the ultimate goal of second language pedagogy is to develop students' ability, it is not very wise for me to test them on their accuracy. I have to test them on their fluency, on their understanding. So too much testing on accuracy is not wholesome.
Yes, absolutely, doctor.
Yes. It's
Yes,
very
Doctor.
strange. No, it is very strange. We want to develop students' fluency. We want to develop students' communicative competence, but we test them on their accuracy. It is very strange, isn't it? Very, very strange.
Yes, Doctor. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Here in this book mentioned that Feld notes that experienced language often plan listening lesson around a series of steps or phases. What does mean that?
Where is it? Could you tell me the exact place of the sentence you are reading?
Yes. Yes.
Page.
Page 67.
Okay, just a moment.
Yes. 2012 expand on the phases of listening lessons. He notes that experienced language teachers often plan listening lessons around a series of steps or phases.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, let me find it. 67 or 8?
At the end.
No, 68. Can you write it down? 68?
Yes, yes. 68 at the top.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay. Is it here? Is it 68? Let me go ahead. 68. Is it around here or here? Where is it? Can you see the...
No, no.
Uh-huh.
No.
Is it... Uh-huh.
67. Yes, 67. Not here.
67?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because my book it is different. Yes. Yes. Here. Yes, Doctor, at the last paragraph. Phil. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
let me have a look.
Last paragraph. Yes.
Field expands
Yes.
on the phases of listening lessons. He notes that experienced language teachers often plan listening lessons around a series of steps and phases. Okay, do you want to understand this sentence? Okay, yeah, it means that if you are an experienced language teacher and you are teaching listening, you have to let me use my pen. Okay, you use different steps. Okay, first one, you teach the vocabulary that a student do not know, but they are very important in the listening. So what do you do at first? You teach students the important vocabulary, not all vocabulary. Remember that the very important vocabulary that they don't know, but they are important to listening. So So this is the first phase. Phase 2, they ask them what pre-listening questions. Okay, so they ask them pre-listening questions. Why they ask them pre-listening questions? Because the teacher wants to activate their prior knowledge. He wants to galvanize their schemata. Okay, number 3. Okay, the teacher gives them a number of pictures, and he says that you are going to listen to something very carefully and you have to identify the pictures. Number 4, do you understand what happens here? We have steps and phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, 5, and so on and so forth. It means that you cannot start a listening activities all at once, because it puts the students under a lot of pressure, and because of the pressure they will fail in the task, and if they fail in the task they become demotivated. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Yes, I understand this.
Okay,
Thank
so you're welcome. So it has to be in phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, phase 6. Okay? You know, as the students move from phase 1 to phase 2, they become more prepared for the listening task. As they move from phase 3 to phase 4, they become more motivated and they learn more and more and more, and they ask more meaningful questions. And they have a good feeling about what they do. They don't feel a failure. Thank you for the question.
Yes, Doctor, thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor, I have a question, Doctor.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Doctor, thank you. Pre-listening activities actually depending on prior knowledge of students. As you
Yes.
know, there is no need to focus on words, grammar, and so on. Is it necessary to involve students in pre-listening activities or not?
I didn't understand, quite well the question. Do we need to
Yes,
what?
Doctor. Yes, Doctor. My question is pre-listening is depending on prior knowledge of students. As you know, there's no need to focus on words, grammar, but it's a part of aim of listening. So, it is necessary? Is it necessary to involve students in pre-listening activities or not?
I'm not sure if I got your question right, but if you say that whether or not pre-listening activity is necessary,
Yes, Doctor.
yes, pre-listening activity is absolutely necessary for students. Why? Because they become cognitively prepared for the task. And if they are oriented to the task cognitively, the chances are that they deal with the task more successfully.
Yes, Doctor. Thank you for your explanation,
Okay,
Doctor.
so
Thank
it
you.
is important. It is important.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. That was a very good question. Very, very good question. Okay, any other questions about this chapter? If any questions about this chapter, I think that we had a very good discussion about the various aspects of this chapter. The important points, of course, I didn't talk about using song and listening activities, because I'm absolutely certain that when you read them on your own, you can grasp the gist. So you don't need it. You don't need it. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you again
You're
for
welcome.
giving me this opportunity to present today. Thank you,
Oh,
Doctor.
it
Thank
was
you.
a
Thank you.
very good presentation. I really, really liked it. No exaggeration. Very liked it because it was very
Thank you.
systematic. It had a very beginning. It had, the middle. It had the end. It was like a task. It had various phases: beginning, middle, and end. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate
You're
that,
welcome.
Doctor. Thank
Okay,
you.